Your Honor, we call what hour?
Hold it, please come to the front of the court. What do you have to see on the witness stand? If you could please turn and face me or raise your right hand. Swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Please have a seat. Responding to questions from Mr. Lane, perhaps also Mr. Snipes, who's directly from Mr. Lane. This is your witness. You may proceed with it.
Thank you, Judge. Lord, pull yourself up to that mic. Turn your chair toward that jury. They're the ones that are interested in what you have to say. I'll go through a little background on you. Would you introduce yourself to the jury and know your full name?
My name is Roy Dorwin Oliver II. I was born in Colorado, but my family moved here to Texas when I was an infant, so I consider myself a Texan.
Do you have a name? Do you have a name?
Family calls me Woody, due to my middle name or Woody.
Some of your classmates that you grew up also are you Woody?
Everyone from the family's school setting knows me as Woody.
So,
Call me a little bit better.
where were you raised?
I was raised in Fort Worth, in Cowtown. Went to school there, lived there up until 17 and 18. My mom and I moved to the Arlington area.
Who raised you?
My mother did.
And what were the circumstances that you and your mother were living under?
She was a single mom trying to go to school, did the best that she could. I was basically raised on the system, food stamps, Section 8 housing, while she was trying to work and get herself through school to provide better for us.
So it was just you and your mom?
Correct.
And did you begin to work also to help out?
I did. As soon as I was 15, I got my first job and worked at Six Flags. A great place to work when you're a kid.
What'd you do out there?
I started off cleaning restrooms, pulling trash, cleaning streets, cleaning up after people.
Six Flags opens, I think, a little before school is out. Were you going to school and working at the same time?
From spring break on, I would go to school during the day, then my mom would either get me out to work, or by then I was able to start driving and try to get myself out there.
So where did you go to elementary and high school?
Elementary, I went to Daggett Elementary, and then I went to Pascal High School, which is just down from TCU.
While you were at Pascal High School, did you work?
I did. Still continued working at Six Flags over Texas, and then that drive was kind of a long drive, so I got a job closer and started working at a music store just down the street from my high school, so I could go to school and then walk right to work.
Did you graduate from high school?
I did not. Halfway through my senior year, I dropped out. They were offering me more hours, and I went that route instead. They offered me more hours and be an assistant manager, so I took the money, unfortunately.
So give this jury some time frame. You dropped out of high school, and what did you do then for the next 2 or 3 years?
Dropped out of high school, worked at the music store, became an assistant manager at that location. A friend of mine was working at a department store in loss prevention. He recruited me, so I went over there to help catch the internal employees stealing or the shoplifters.
Did you ever, at that point in your life, have any interest in the military and or being a police officer or a fireman?
Not being a police officer so much, but I was really intrigued by the fire department. That girl I went to school with, her father was a firefighter. Always come up on career day, and I was really intrigued on what they got to do. It wasn't just fighting fires, it was so much more, helping the community, medical calls, changing batteries on smoke detectors for people that couldn't do it themselves. You have to really go out there and get hands-on with the citizens.
Did you become a volunteer fire employee?
When I was 20 years old, we moved from Fort Worth, we being my mother and I moved from Fort Worth to a small little city called Dalworthington Gardens. It's a small town in the city of Arlington. They needed volunteers for the fire department. I was intrigued in firefighting, so I figured this was a good way to get some experience to see what it really was all about, not just hearing the stories.
Well, did you go become a volunteer firefighter?
I did. I became a volunteer with them. I was a volunteer firefighter for about 4.5 years.
Were you working, also making money at that period of time?
I did short time after I got off as a volunteer, which is just that volunteer, it's not a paid position. They had a paid position come available as a dispatcher.
And when you say they, we don't know who they
I'm
are.
sorry, back down Wellington Gardens. So I was a dispatcher, which entails answering non-emergency calls, answering the 911 phone, doing all the radio traffic for the officers, for the fire department. And also we looked in on the prisoners that they arrested.
How long did you do that?
I got that job short time after I became a volunteer, so it was roughly 4 to 4.5 years.
And did you ever get a GED?
I did. I went back later on and got my GED in the city of Arlington, so I could continue my education and try to better myself.
And do you remember what year that was in?
Off the top of my head, I do not. I believe it was around 2002, 2001, 2002, I believe.
When did you decide that you wanted to become a police officer?
That wasn't until after my military time.
So did you decide you wanted to go into the military?
I was intrigued by the fire department. I'd been a volunteer for a long time. Fort Worth Fire Department, which is my hometown, was hiring. They were doing a test. It's a civil service process, so everyone goes in, they take the same test, and everything's based on the test on how you rank. I made roughly 80 something on the test, which from my schooling, anything over 70 is passing. I thought I did pretty good. I was in about 300 people. I was in about the middle of the list. So I found that they're only hiring 30 positions. You're seeing scores that are 110, 102, 101, and didn't know how you can get a score higher than 100. I didn't see any extra credit on the test. Then I found those through veterans preference points. If you were a veteran, you got 10 extra points to add it on. So that's when I decided to join the military, get some training, get some experience, but also when I take a civil service test, it would help me out with school.
So why did you join the military then?
For the civil service point test, and then also for the training.
At the point that you joined the military, had the war in Iraq ever crossed your mind?
I always knew it was a possibility, but you're kind of hoping, well, maybe it'll be done by then.
How old were you?
I was 24 at the time.
And did you go down and volunteer? I think it's an all-volunteer army now.
All volunteer military.
So where did you remember when you volunteered and when you went in?
I know I went to basic March, I believe it was 23rd of 2004. It was March of 2004, I believe.
Where did you do your basic training?
I did one station unit training.
What does that mean?
What that means is instead of going to a conventional boot camp for the military for X amount of time and then going somewhere else to learn your actual skill, your job, your trade, whether it's a clerk or a mechanic, I went to a place where everything was combined together in one. So it was one station unit training. So for infantry, we just did everything straight through for 14 or 16 weeks.
And where did that occur?
That occurred at Fort Benning in Georgia.
On the infantry.
Yes, sir.
So what did they determine your specialty would be?
I was going to be an infantryman, which is designated as 11 Bravo, but then I was also not volunteered, but we were highly encouraged to go to additional training for a anti-tank, anti-emplacement missile system called the Javelin. So that required 2 additional weeks after I got done with my infantry training.
And where did you do the Javelin training?
That was there on site at Fort Benning, Georgia.
After you finished your training, did the Army certify you then to be eligible for going out in the field?
Yes, sir.
And where did they send you first?
My orders were to go to Fort Lewis, Washington, home of the Strikers.
And what's a striker?
Striker is an 8-wheeled armored vehicle. They classify vehicles by their weight and size. This was classified as a medium armor due to its weight, and it had wheels, 8 wheels, instead of being a track like a tank.
And how many soldiers are assigned to a striker?
It's going to depend on your unit. If you're a line unit, a line infantry unit where there's a lot of guys, or depending on what your specialty is. I got put into a reconnaissance unit. So
What is a reconnaissance unit?
our job was to slip out, gather information, observe a target, observe information, gather it, report it back to a higher element so they could take action on it.
And when you quote would slip out, were you in a striker vehicle when you did that?
We were in our vehicles.
And that's what you were trained with to do?
Correct.
And you were assigned there in Fort Lewis. How long did you stay in Fort Lewis?
I was in Fort Lewis roughly 2 months. I got to my unit, and as soon as I got there, they said, don't get comfortable. We've got orders to go to Iraq here soon, so didn't unpack much.
Were you married at that time?
At that time, I was not.
How'd you feel about being told you were going to be deployed to a war?
That definitely gets your attention.
Well, the reality set in.
Yes, it did.
Were you talking to veterans that had been overseas in that particular war there at Fort Lewis?
There were a handful of individuals that were, this was 2004, so Iraq had only been going on for a little over a year, I believe. So there weren't really a whole lot of experience or combat veterans that could pass information on to us, but the few that were there were trying to be very helpful and prepare us for what was ahead.
And do you feel that the Army prepared you for what you were going to find when you got to Iraq?
I don't think you can ever be 100% prepared for it. That they do their best. They get you the basic knowledge, a little more if they can, but you're not ever 100% prepared for that.
And when you use the word unit, how many people were in the unit that you were in?
Unit, it depends on how you want to use that term. Unit can be your division.
Well, let's talk about who you were closely associated with before you left to go to Iraq, and did you go as a particular unit on a striker there?
My whole brigade, which I can't even tell you numbers on how many guys or trucks that is, it's a bunch, went over as a brigade. When I say my unit, I normally refer to as specifically my platoon of 18 guys, or my troop, which is kind of like a platoon, but cavalry standards, as we work together as a unit.
And had you worked together as a unit there at Fort Lewis in preparation of deployment?
They'd been together for a year or two prior, so they'd done a lot of training.
Who's that?
My platoon, my squad and my platoon had been together for roughly, some had been there for 2 years, some had been there for a year, so they had good communication amongst each other, good rapport with each other, and fed off of each other real well. I just got thrown into the mix, and here you go. But they did a good job of taking me underneath their wing and getting me up to speed.
And so you felt they got you up to speed?
I believe they did.
Were you deployed?
We all went over together.
And when you went over, where were you talking about?
Over to Iraq.
And when you went to Iraq, where did you go? Where was your unit assigned?
We were assigned originally to Mosul, Iraq, which is kind of the northern part of the country.
Did they prepare you for being in Mosul?
They just prepared us for that area in general, not specifically different geographic parts of the country.
And what did they prepare you to find when you got to Mosul?
They prepared us for the worst that we were going to be into a fight. And
Would you classify that as what we would said a long time ago, a hot area.
It's a hot area, but we were not fighting a conventional battle. We're not fighting a uniform body that you've got to be prepared for anything that can happen, because the Iraqi army by then was dissolved. The fighting is people wearing regular clothes, planting bombs underneath the roads, putting bombs inside their cars, and driving them at you. Their cars, not the military vehicles, but the personal cars.
When you first got to Iraq, what was the first time that you realized that you were really in a war?
Probably within the first 24 hours when we got our first mortar attack.
And was this a large compound with all of the amenities of officers' clubs and NCO clubs and places to relax and have fun? Where were you?
We lived in, they call them connexes. There's metal shipping containers. They put an air conditioner, some beds in there, and those are what we slept in. Some other camps might have really large tents. We were kind of fortunate to have these mobile units to sleep in. Big industrial tents for our chow hall, or where we got our food. The gym and the MWR where the internet connection was, so we could check our emails and try to call home, or set up in just really big tents.
How many do you think troops were assigned to that particular, was it called a base, post, a fort, what was it?
Juarez was considered a FOB, F-O-B, forward operating base, I believe.
Well, how close were you to another country there?
Turkey was to our north. I can't tell you how many miles. Syria was a little bit farther off to our west, quite a bit farther off.
Well, did you have an identifiable enemy out there, or was it just
No,
whatever
there's
happens, it happens?
whatever happens is going to happen. You don't know where it's coming from or by who.
So, in that striker unit, then you're in a particular vehicle that's called a striker.
Correct.
And you had a unit that you were assigned to, the men that were on that striker. And what did y'all do? Another thing, we've heard the term outside the wire. What does that mean to you?
Outside the wires, anytime you are off your fob, off your camp, off the security of other units where you live, and you go inside the wire, you feel a little bit safer because you have guard towers, barbed wire, C-wire, minefields. You go outside the wire, you're out in the city, out in the town, out in the countryside where you have no protection by your vehicle.
You used the term presence operation. What did that mean?
We do presence operations or presence patrols where it's just your presence, your being. You go into a village, you go into the city, you're just driving around so people know you're there. You're trying to deter people from bank bombs. You're trying to deter from attacks. It's just being there, being seen. It just goes a long way.
A long way towards what?
Deterring the enemy. We call them we have the AIF, the anti-Iraqi forces, and AQI, Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Those were our two main bad cells. Just trying to let them know, hey, we're here. Please don't do anything. Please don't play anything. And try to get them to go away.
Would you always have an interpreter with you?
Yes.
So you could communicate with the people?
Correct.
While you were at that particular FOB, was there something, well, what was your rank when you finally got to Iraq?
I was a PV1 and E1. That is the very, very lowest rank there is in the military.
Did you have a lieutenant, a captain? Who did you have over you? On your striker unit?
In my striker unit, the highest ranking would be a lieutenant, and he would be the just a platoon leader. His job is, he was the officer responsible for getting the mission and passing it to us and letting us know what we were going to be doing.
Was your particular unit, while you were there that first tour, were you assigned to a special operation?
We were detached My unit was 1st Brigade, 25th Infantry. That was the patch that we wore. We were called OPCON, Operational Control, moved over somewhere else. We were part of a task force carrying out a specific mission with specific targets.
When you say we, how many is it we?
I could not tell you the size of the task force. It was small. It was mobile.
Were they all striker units, the striker vehicle?
No. The reason we were moved over to that unit is their Humvees, their vehicles were getting pounded by IEDs and attacks. And we had more armor on our vehicles. We were a recon unit, so we had less guys to fill the trucks. So they were able to put their people into our trucks. We would drive them out, and we would help them however we could while they performed their mission. Then we get them back in our trucks and drive them back into the camp or the base.
And I assume, and we don't need to go into it, but you were involved in IED explosions. What is an IED?
An IED is an improvised explosive device. They can be placed anywhere, under bridges, under roads, in the pavement.
Did you see things like that, personally observe things like that?
I personally felt them,
Did
yes.
you, was one of your striker units that you were assigned to involved in IED explosions?
I was personally hit twice.
And were you involved in the type of, and we always see war pictures where everybody's running around shooting everybody. Was that kind of war that was being fought over there?
No, you might have sporadic little incidents like that, but these were mainly hit and runs. They would throw something at us, plant something, initiate the ambush, and then they'd book it out of the area.
And how long were you assigned to that task force?
We spent 6 months on the task force.
Was there a particular individual that the Army was trying to capture at that point?
Yes, there was.
Who was that?
Zakawi.
And do you know now who Zakawi, did you know who Zakawi was then?
He was the head of the AQI, Al-Qaeda in Iraq. That was the forerunner for ISIS. They weren't called ISIS at that time by us.
Was the unit that you were assigned to in your particular striker really ever successful in finding him?
No, we were successful in removing some of his people off the board, but he always eluded us.
So, how many times were you involved in IED explosions that first tour?
My truck specifically, one IED explosion, one anti-tank explosion.
Did you lose any troops out of your unit there on that striker?
On my platoon, in my truck, no.
When you left the ROC, what was your grade? What was your rank?
I was an E3 out of PFC. I got promoted twice while we were deployed.
And what was your job on the striker?
I started off as a dismount, so anytime something would happen, I would get out of the truck and engage the enemy or move debris or help with any type of assault. And then I got moved into the driver's position maybe a month or two while we were over there, so that I learned how to drive it, maneuver it, and I actually drove the lead vehicle, so I got to be in all the planning and staging, so I knew the route, so if something did happen, I knew automatically where to go, what the backup plan was, and how to navigate around.
Who chose you to do that?
The truck captain, who was an E6, Staff Sergeant Ross.
What was that? A promotion that you were proud of to become the driver?
Not particularly at first, but after a few weeks, there's just nothing wrong with it. I changed, it was something new. Hadn't had a lot of experience driving armored vehicles, and now I'm thrown in that situation in a combat role. There's a lot to undertake.
Were you successful?
I believe I was. We didn't have any issues, and everyone came back in one piece.
All of your troops that you served with came back from Iraq in one piece?
Everyone in my immediate platoon did.
You were aware of losing some soldiers there that you knew, all right?
Yes.
You told me a story about eating cheeseburgers. What is that about?
We, bacon cheeseburgers.
Bacon cheeseburger.
Wait a second. We have extra missions that would come up, extra taskings. And ours was QRF, Quick Reaction Force. It's basically your 911 for the troops that are out on missions. So if a unit goes out and they get ambushed, we would go out to rescue them. It's a 24-hour, either a 12 or 24-hour task. And I believe ours was 24 hours, and we just gotten done. We were, Font Morez on the west side of the road.
I'm sorry, what?
Font Morez.
What is that?
That's the font that we lived on, the Fort operating base.
The name was
Morez.
Moraz.
Then across the road was another base that had an airfield. We called it Diamondback. And we were staged on Diamondback for this mission, or for this tasking. We'd gotten done, our time was up, go back to our rooms, go to sleep time. Daniel Rogers, we put the bug in his ear about staying on Diamondback.
Who's Daniel Rogers?
He was the gunner on the last truck where the platoon sergeant was.
And what was his grade?
He was an E4, he was a specialist.
He was above you.
Yes. So,
Did you know him well? Okay, go ahead.
good guy. Put the bug in the platoon sergeant's ear of, hey, let's stay here. Let's eat over here. Let's not go back across the street, because they would put bacon on the cheeseburgers for us. I'm done with that. They wouldn't on the res. So after a little debate, the platoon sergeant said, okay, we'll stay over here and we'll eat over here. And about time, there was a big explosion. Suicide bomber had gone into the chow hall in Morez and blew himself up, killing our supply sergeant. We would have been there eating bad for bacon cheeseburgers.
So what do you eat a bacon cheeseburger every year?
December 21st.
And what's that in honor of?
Sergeant Van Coleman, not the guy that we killed.
Got blown up that
Yeah. Bacon cheeseburger.
day. When did you come home from that first tour?
We came back September of 2005.
And did you spend the full tour there? Which I understand would have been a 12-month tour of Iraq, is that correct?
Correct. We were just 2 or 3 weeks short of a full year. But we, if you're asking if we stayed in Iraq the whole time, yes. If we stayed in Morez or Mosul, we did not. We went down to Fallujah for Operation Phantom Fury, the second clear.
If my memory of history is correct, Fallujah was a very horrible situation.
It was very intense. They were hesitant about us going into Fallujah, us being my specific platoon, because we were not a full combat strength infantry unit. We were a recon unit, so we didn't have the manpower. So we ran missions on the outskirts of the town, trying to prevent the fighters that were trying to sneak in, trying to set traps for the initial invasion. We were running interference, trying to make sure the route stayed clear.
Well, there was a lot of action.
There was. We were fortunate enough that we were on the perimeter of the city.
A lot of Marines were in Fallujah.
There were.
So when you left Iraq, were you ready to leave?
We can't get out of that place fast enough.
And where did you go when they brought you back to the States?
We went back to our base in Fort Lewis, Washington.
It seems like everybody in infantry goes to Fort Lewis.
It's not a bad place. It's a very pretty country up there. If you don't mind being wet 10 out of 12 months out of the year, it's very pretty.
How long were you there then after you came back?
I think I stayed there for about a year.
And what did you do?
I joined the Army to get some points for tests, to see the world, and then you realize there's no place like home, and I want to go back to Texas. So I re-enlisted, so I added more time on my initial contract, and so I could come back to Texas, to Fort Hood.
Now, actually, you fellows at that time were signing contracts with the United States Army.
Yes.
And you would give them so much time and they would give you so much in return if you come back alive.
Correct.
And you then, when you use that term re-up, what does that mean? You would finish your contract time?
I was in the last year of my contract. During that time, you can decide whether you're going to, you still have to finish that last year, but you can decide if you want to extend, re-enlist. So if there's a school you want to go to or a specific base you want to go to somewhere in the world, you can basically sign another contract to get whatever it is you're trying to get: school, desired posting, college option. So you take a semester, basically, if I remember correctly, out of the military and just go to school. Your duties on those you go to college, if that was the case. So it's, I'm giving the Army more time. The Army's giving me something that.
And they let you choose where you can go.
If there is an opening and that job is accepted at that post.
Well, did you end up back in Texas?
I did Fort Hood.
Fort Hood. Excellent.
That's
Do you
correct.
remember when you got to Fort Hood?
I think it was in '07, but I'm not 100% on that.
And how long were you at Fort Hood?
I was at Fort Hood from whenever, up until after my end to '09 when I got out of the military, after my last deployment. I'm sorry, 2010.
So what did you do while you were at Fort Hood?
I was part of, when I got to Fort Hood, it was kind of the same situation as when I got to Fort Lewis. It was, welcome to Fort Hood. The unit you're going to is, well, leaving for Iraq in a very short time. Big surprise. So I got assigned to the unit, was prepping, but I was having some medical issues with my back and my neck. There was either, at that time, I was basically put behind a desk until they could solve whatever the issue was. They didn't know if it was a pre-existing injury from my first deployment, if it was a congenital issue, the way the spine was formed. They didn't know, so they wanted to do a thorough study to make sure my back was suitable for the physical demands of the military. So I rode a desk on rear detachment while that unit was deployed. My job, that was, new soldiers would come into the unit, we would train them, get them prepared, we had a 2-week window, and then we had to send them over to the parent unit, which was in Iraq. So that's why I did my first part at Fort Hood, was running a desk.
How long did that last?
It felt like too long, but well, maybe 2.5 to 3 years.
Did you marry during that period of time?
No, I had gotten married before I went to Iraq the first time. When I got to Fort Lewis, I was not married. I was dating an individual. Since I found out I was going to Iraq, in a few weeks, we decided to speed things up and got married right before deployment.
Were you able to put a pay request in and have so much of your pay sent to her?
Correct.
Wasn't uncommon for young soldiers to marry before they went overseas.
When I became a sergeant, I learned I saw a lot of soldiers get married right away. It was a very common thing.
So did you solve the issue with your health issue?
After a number of doctors, the Army actually had to send me outside to a civilian doctor because it was so specialized. The doctor cleared me and put me back on deployable status.
So when you were put back on deployable status, that was at Fort Hood?
Yes.
So did something in particular happen to you there as far as where they were going to assign you and what you were going to do when you were back there?
Working for the brigade headquarters in the operations cell, I ran on the writ attachment, I was the non-commissioned officer in charge, or NCOIC of the S3 shop. Army likes to put acronyms and letters and numbers to everything, so basically S3 meant operations. S1 was personnel, S2 was intel. It's just the way they classify everything. So I was running operations for writ attachment. When the unit came back, I was the school non-commissioned officer. So my job was to make sure everyone got to the appropriate schooling and education they needed for that job, that rank, that position. I worked immediately for a sergeant major, an operations sergeant major. Sergeant major is the highest enlisted rank in the Army. So this guy was pretty influential on what got done. To reward me for the work I had done on writ attachment and getting people to schools and trained, he told me once I got my deployment status, I could pick which unit within the brigade I could go to. And when I was looking to see where I wanted to go, I was then approached by another NCO, non-commissioned officer, who requested that I go talk to him and listen to what they were doing at his unit.
And so, bottom line is, what was that unit and what did they ask you to do?
He was putting together a PSD, a personal security detachment, for the battalion commander and battalion sergeant major at that point, and then a battalion sergeant major, and wanted me to come over, since I had combat experience, sergeant stripes by that time, and knew I was good with interacting with individuals if I would come over and be on the PSD team for the colonel. So that job is basically...
Well, were you assigned to that job?
I was assigned to that job, and then after being there for a few weeks, I was actually assigned to be the battalion commander's personal security officer.
And what was his grade? What was his rank?
He was a lieutenant colonel.
Did you know him prior to the time he was assigned to his personal security?
I knew of him. I had never met the guy.
Was he a combat veteran?
I believe he was.
Well, did you accept that assignment?
Yes, I did.
And what was your duty assignment then? Before you went over, what they tell you your job was?
Bring him back alive. I was there to protect him at all costs. So anytime he went somewhere, I was there with him.
How many soldiers are assigned to personal security detail?
I think we had roughly 20 to 22, I believe, on Team 1.
And y'all all went together then over back to Iraq?
Correct.
And when you went back to Iraq, were you still married at that point?
Yes.
And did you go back as a unit with the lieutenant colonel?
Yes.
And when you got to Iraq, what was your job there in Iraq?
The second time,
Was to bring him back alive, but what did you do?
I escorted him everywhere he went outside the camp. So any meeting he had, we all rolled as a platoon in all of our vehicles. My guys got out, formed a security barrier. I would get off the colonel, I would escort him into and during and then out of a meeting. So while my guys were watching routes, watching what was going on, I stayed right next to the colonel. So if any kind of ambush happened, attack, I was there to pull him out, put myself between the threat and him, get him out to the vehicles, and get us out of there.
And you knew that when you accepted the job?
I did.
Well, how long did you perform those duties in Iraq?
We were there for, it was a 12-month deployment, but I believe we came back a month early.
Did you bring the colonel back with you?
One piece, full intact.
Did you lose any of the men that were in that particular unit with you?
No, no casualties.
I assume, did you see some combat while you were his personal security? Okay.
We didn't see much. I believe we only had one contact, and that was, we didn't even have the colonel with us. We were on loan. I believe we had a United Nations representative with us that we were protecting.
So when you came back from Iraq, your second tour, where did they send you?
We went back to Fort Hood, back to our parent unit.
And how long were you there?
After I got back, I was only there for a couple months before I got out.
Your enlistment term was up.
My enlistment term was actually up 2 weeks after I got to Iraq. I got to Iraq, my contract was up, but they have this thing called stop loss to where your contract's up, you're not getting out, sorry. So I ran most of that deployment actually as a stop loss individual.
Well, when you came back, I assume you were awarded the standard unit citations and personal citations. There wasn't any Silver Stars or Purple Hearts or anything we heard from?
No. We were very fortunate on this deployment, very little contact. I'd like to say it was a combination of luck and a combination of the training of my soldiers being vigilant, and that goes a long way.
Did you consider yourself a war hero when you came home?
No. The heroes, those are the ones that don't come home.
Someone put on. So you got out, where'd you go then?
I was approached by my former employer, Chief Wayborn.
Who's now the sheriff of Tarrant County?
That's correct.
And he was the chief at Delaware.
He was the chief at Dale Wellington Gardens, and he said that they would sponsor me through the academies if I wanted a job there.
And y'all were living, your mother was still living there in Delaware.
She was still a resident of Dale Wellington Gardens. We sometimes call it DWG, just for short. Dale Wellington Gardens is a really long name for a city. I say that, I apologize.
So when you, when Wayburn approached you, did you take his offer and go to the academy?
I did.
Where did you go?
I went to Tarrant County College in Fort Worth.
And that's a pretty recognized training academy, and students that come out of there go to various police departments who are like sponsored.
Correct.
Did you go through the system one time? Did you have to repeat anything, or did you go through it?
No, I passed the whole module, the whole academy on the first time.
And after you left the academy, did somebody sponsor you at that point?
They sponsored me before I got into the academy. They reserved my seats. I paid for it, but they reserved my seat. So
They being Delaware.
they being Dale Wellington Gardens that way, I had a guaranteed place in that academy, so it wasn't in limbo.
Well, but when you got out, you still have to have some city that can bring you on, and that gives you the authority to do the duties of a police officer.
Correct. When I completed the academy, I went back to Dale Wellington Gardens, and they swore me in as an officer. They carried my commission. And I went back to dispatching, so I was kind of doing a dual role, dispatching and then going through the field training to be an officer to where I could operate on my own on the streets.
And how long did you stay in Delaware Gardens?
I stayed there that time just under a year.
Were you married?
I was.
And then where did you go?
Then I went over to Ball Springs.
And when you went to Ball Springs, did you carry the basic police officer's certification?
Yes, just basic peace officer.
And today, what certifications do you have?
It's basic peace officer.
You heard Captain Coons earlier talking about the various levels of certification.
Correct.
You're still at the lowest level.
Correct.
Why did you choose Ball Springs?
I was actually referred to Ball Springs by a friend of mine that told me that they were constantly short-handed, and it was a good place to work just due to the diversity of the city, what goes on inside that city. You'll see so much in a short period of time.
Let me ask you something. Was the Army, while you were in, very diversified as far as cultures, races?
No.
You could make a part of everybody?
Yes.
Did you serve with all sorts of people in the Army?
Served, lived with, people from all over the world. My roommate, my first deployment was from Romania. One of the guys, what's that?
Black soldiers there in your unit?
Black, Hispanic, Asian, Puerto Rican, weed, foreign from, I mean, they came all sizes, colors, and shapes.
Well, do you agree with the expression that when the shooting starts, you're not paying attention to what color anybody is around you?
Is that true?
Well, you went to Ball Springs. Did you know about Ball Springs?
No, I just knew basically where it was on the map, and I didn't know population density, anything other than that.
They hired you to be what?
They hired me to be a patrol officer.
And did they send you through any additional training or academies or anything?
Through the course of my time there, I went to various other intermediate trainings, crime scene, child abuse, Spanish, patrol rifle school, precision rifle school, crisis management. Went through quite a bit.
Use of force?
Use of force for intermediate, use of force, periodic updates, just.
What would you consider yourself an officer that tried to stay abreast of training that was at least available to you?
Yes.
Did you feel training was important?
Training education is very paramount in law enforcement.
When you first began, then you were just simply what we refer to as a patrol officer.
Correct.
In Ball Springs, is that 2 men in the car or 1 man?
You're in the car. Once you get cut loose from training, it's just you and your patrol bag.
Now, you mean training, you mean you were assigned to what's referred to as a field training officer.
Correct.
That's an individual that just takes you around, shows you what he expects, watches you make stops to see if you're doing it percent of the way Ball Springs wants it done, things like that.
Correct.
Of course, within the law, but I mean, was policing, what we refer to as community policing, was that important to Ball Springs?
It's very important. Part of my time at Ball Springs, I was a bike patrol officer. Officer Tyler Gross and myself, we were bikes during the summer.
Why did you choose that volunteer?
The department asked for volunteers, and we were 2 individuals that decided riding a bike with a Kevlar vest on in the middle of Texas summer was a good idea.
Now, were you and Gross in Iraq at the same time?
Not to my knowledge.
Did you know Gross from the military?
No, I did not.
What was your feelings when you realized that he was an Iraqi veteran?
It just made our bond that much closer.
Kind of like brothers.
Yes.
Did you feel like you and he could communicate pretty well?
We could, verbally and non-verbally, we could understand each other.
Did you enjoy working with him?
I did. He's a goofy guy. He's fun to be around, but he's very serious when that time comes.
Is he a good cop?
I believe he is.
So y'all worked as bike patrol, and then I assume after the summers you went back to driving the car?
We went back to driving the car. We were normally on different shifts from each other, but we overlapped some. If my shift was short, he would come in for overtime, or I would go work his shift for overtime, or we worked special events together. And we also did, like I said, the bike patrol together for a couple summers.
How many officers would normally be on the street during the day at Ball Springs?
It's really going to depend on if anyone's taking a vacation day, but you can have as low as 6 officers, as high as 6 officers, to as low as, including your supervisor, 4 officers.
How big is Ball Springs?
Size-wise, it's roughly 10 miles, and
Do you have any idea what the population is?
not off the top of my head.
But it's not a large city, it's a small city.
Small, medium size. It's not a Dallas or Mesquite, but it's not a little dot on the map either.
Is Ball Springs contiguous to other cities?
Yes, so our north border borders with Mesquite, our west border is with Dallas. East border is part Mesquite and part unincorporated county, I believe. And south is city of Dallas.
You work, being contiguous, in other words, connecting to each other, would you work with the officers in those other cities on
No,
calls?
it would be nothing unusual for us to back up a Mesquite officer, Mesquite back us up, same with Dallas or Dallas County. If you saw an officer with their lights on and you knew no one had their, in your area or from your department was in that area, then you go over there to see if they need help. Likewise, if they were on a call and their backup wasn't close, they might call their dispatcher to call our dispatcher to have us go. So we were constantly working with Mesquite, Dallas, and Dallas Sheriff's Office, the patrol section, quite regularly.
I meant to ask you, were you honorably discharged from the military?
Yes, I was.
And at the time you went to work for Law Springs, then were you still married?
Yes.
And what was her name?
Her name was Amy.
And did y'all subsequently divorce?
We did.
Did you have children from that marriage while y'all were married?
While we were married, no.
And you remember about when you divorced her?
I believe it was 2013, I believe.
And now you currently, I think I would refer to as in a marriage, common law marriage with another woman.
Correct. We've been together for 4.5 years and haven't been together.
And what is her name?
Her name's Ingrid.
And where is she from?
She's from Ecuador.
How did you meet her?
Met her actually working. She works at a convenience store that was in our city, so just going in there, getting drinks, cigarettes, and water. I'd see her quite often, and we just formed a connection and started dating.
You don't have a child?
We do.
What's his name?
His name's Tom.
Does he have special needs?
He's autistic.
Are you close to Tom?
Oh, yeah. We've got
Could you spell his name?
TAB.
Does he live with you? And
Yes.
well, there's been reports that you had two children born almost at the same time. Can you explain that to the jury?
I have a daughter and a son, and they are what I refer to as half twins. They have different moms. He is the father. They're born 12 days apart. Before I met my now wife, my ex-wife and I were going through in vitro. We didn't have a kid together. She didn't know if she was going to remarry. I didn't know if I was going to remarry. Neither one of us had a kid in our life. Yes, there were processes backwards, but we were going to be a divorced couple that had a kid. There's a lot of divorced couples that have kids. We just were out of sequence. I'm a big believer, once you give someone your word, that's your bond. It doesn't have to be a piece of paper, so I agreed to do this with my ex-wife. So when I got involved with Ingrid, I let her know what was going on. It did cause a little bit of a jealousy issue, but I was not going to back away from the agreement bond I made with my ex-wife, so we continued with fertility. So,
I mean, the implication is that you were having a sexual relationship with your ex-wife.
no, there's doctors and science.
You were a sperm donor for her.
Yes,
And your wife liked it, but she knew about it.
correct. I was intimate with the paper cup.
Yes. So let me ask you something. That child was born, are you on the birth certificate?
Yes,
And do you voluntarily going to pay child support to that child?
I have.
And do you see her?
I was seeing her once a week, but until while on duty shooting.
So you had, up until the point that this came into your life, the shooting came into your life, you had a good relationship with your daughter.
Yes.
And Your son and daughter are how old now, is that?
3.
You live with Ingrid and Todd?
Yes.
And up until the time of the shooting, you were seeing your daughter.
Yes, sir.
You had been on the Ball Springs Police Force how long prior to the time you were April the 29th or 27th?
I believe it was roughly 6 years at that point.
What had you been doing for 6 years at that point?
I was a patrol officer, but I pick up extra duties of bike patrol, work off-duty events at parks, softball games. I also did as part of the entry team doing high-risk awards. Covered a little bit of everything.
The weapon that you carried in your patrol vehicle that was involved in this particular incident, was that a weapon that was provided to you by Ball Springs?
Yes, it was.
So it was a government issue.
Yes.
Did you modify it in any way?
I added a grip on the front just to ensure my hand placement went to the same place every time for consistency. And then I moved the, there's a flashlight mounted on it. The pressure pad for the flashlight wasn't if you were holding the weapon on the right side, pressure pad was on the left side. I moved it from the left side to the top of the rifle.
Well, none of those affected the performance of the
No, I didn't do anything mechanically to it. That's way outside my scope of expertise.
Okay, I think all the reports refer to this as an MC carbine, but what is it really?
It's an AR platform.
And an AR-15 is the civilian version of the M16 that was used in the military.
Roughly, yes.
Did you have to qualify with this weapon before you could have it in your vehicle?
Yes.
And how long did you have that weapon?
We qualified on that the week before the shooting.
So you had gone through the training with the range master, you were qualified to carry the weapon, you were authorized to carry the weapon, and it was a Ball Springs issued weapon.
That is correct.
And were you comfortable with it? I mean, I assume you fired many times a semi-automatic weapon in the military.
Yes, I didn't have any issues with it. We had them only a short time, but the brief training that we had and the qualification, it seemed to function pretty decently.
Tell this jury what Ball Springs required in order to keep that weapon while you were in the patrol car.
Depending on the type of vehicle you were driving, depended on where the rifle would go. If you were driving a Crown Victoria, that only had one weapon rack above the head, that was for the shotgun. So a patrol rifle would go in the trunk. The SUVs, they had 2 racks in between the 2 front seats, which ran, I'd say north and south, but ran up and down. One for the shotgun, one for the patrol rifle. The status of the patrol rifle was you had the magazine inside the weapon on safe, but you did not have a weapon, or you did not have a round inside the chamber due to safety reasons.
And that's the way you were trained, and that's what Ball Springs required.
Correct.
Prior to April the 29th, had you been informed of or had you known of other shootings in that area?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury about that?
We had worked a shooting, my shift, so Officer Chambly, myself, not sure who else was on that day, to be honest with you. Right about shift change, there had been a report of a shooting, found an individual with a gunshot wound to the hand. Individual was uncooperative, no suspect information, shooter at large. That was roughly a few blocks over, so no more than half a mile. Then a month or two previous, there had been a house party of roughly, say go from our station, roughly 3 miles into the city of Mesquite from
my station, that house party, large party, shots fired, individual killed, suspects unknown, what the status was at that point. So we brief each other, we talk to other departments, find out what's going on, because just because there's a city limit, it doesn't stop one incident going from one place to the other, or vice versa.
And how would a Ball Springs officer be informed of that shooting in Mesquite?
I heard about that one on the news and from a Mesquite officer that there's a quick trip on Lake June that's inside Ball Springs, but it's not far from the city of Mesquite, so we run into each other at the gas station getting drinks or getting gas, and we just talk about what they're seeing, what we're seeing, and we compare notes.
Well, that's pretty typical, and you try to keep each other informed of what's going on in the neighborhood, as I would say.
As a cop, you're constantly gathering information. You just get these little nuggets of information. You just put them in the back of your mind because you don't know when you're going to need them, if you're going to need them.
Well, let's go up to April the 29th. Tell this jury, at what time did you go on duty up there?
Mr. Lane, I think that would be a good time to take a break for the morning. Members of the jury, if you take 10 minutes, please be back at 5 minutes. I'm sorry, 10 minutes, 11. All rise for the jury.